Let's face it, we all have issues. Issues can become problems. Problems without proper resolution can result into something greater. In this case, mental illness. Mental illness affects every community, but communities have different barriers and issues causing mental illness. In our community, there are internal barriers we have created in seeking and receiving effective treatment and care. This program attempts to not only acknowledge our state of mental illness, but initiate the conversation on the road to solutions. In this episode, Outside the Pulpit, our conversation is with Bishop Johnson, Senior Pastor of the House of the Lord Church in Akron, Ohio. We will discuss the positioning of the church in addressing and coping with mental illness. Please join us. We are talking about mental health and the mental illness in the black community. Do you think we have enough time to get into that? You think so?
No, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to do it anyway because that's a major thing that we need to talk about, a major subject that we're actually dealing with in the city of Akron right now, trying to determine how to do this.
Right. Okay, so for the basis of this episode, Out of the Pulpit, and since we have you, we want to talk about it kind of in the church and how it relates to the faith-based community. But before we dive into it, just for the basis of this conversation, what is your definition of mental illness?
You know, that's a great question. I don't know, being caught off guard like this, it's a great question. But mental illness means that mentally, and I would include emotionally, something is not functioning as it was designed to function. So whether that's, when we think mental, we generally are talking about intellectual processes because we are Americans and Greeks. So we think intellect only. I don't. I do a lot of reading in Greek, in Eastern Orthodox and in other religions from that perspective, from an Eastern perspective of Christianity. So your entire, from a biblical perspective, is your entire innermost being, your heart.
Yes.
Something's wrong with you at that level. It's not functioning as God designed it to function.
Right. Well, for off the fly, that was pretty good. So how would you describe, taking that, how would you describe mental health, mental illness in the church, in the black church?
Well, in the church, one of the problems that we have is that we don't deal very much with health or illness at any level. What we deal with more is we spiritualize most things and we don't deal with them from a practical perspective. So we don't, that's one of the issues that the city of Akron is trying to deal with right now. How do we get churches to avail themselves of resources for people who are struggling with mental illnesses, there are resources there, but I don't go. Why don't I go? Why don't the black church avail themselves? Why don't the members of the black church come? And it's because we don't see it that way. We operate holistically. We tend to operate more spiritually, and so therefore, for years we have not had these things. When we do have them, we're dealing right now with the healthcare crisis. Do I have the money? I don't. First of all, I don't have a base as a church that deals with mental illness. So it wouldn't be anything I would hear from the pulpit.
Right.
Number two, if I heard it, I don't have a history of going to doctors. That's another issue. Three, if somebody suggested I would go, then I don't have the resources, the funds to go. So you have a multi-layered problem here of dealing with people who have mental illness. Although it does come up in the Bible, it's just one of those things we don't deal with. Right. Another area that we don't deal with, that I deal a lot with, is grief recovery. Dealing with the emotions of grieving and those kind of things. That's in the Bible over and over and over again. I don't think I've ever heard one sermon out of it unless I preached it.
Right.
But it's there, but it just doesn't tend to be what we deal with.
Right. You said that we spiritualize or take a holistic approach. Is that a hindrance, or is that a good or bad thing? Why do you think so?
Well, I think when I say spiritualize, I'm saying that what we do is we will take it and we delete the elements that don't have anything to do with the spirit. So we're not looking at the emotions, we're not looking at the intellect, we're looking at specifically the spiritual applications only. The African American church and the Bible deals with things in a holistic way, which would allow us to bring in those kind of things. But Americans are not holistic. Americans are individualistic. We tend to break things down in a Greek-oriented perspective. We're going to make it into the intellect, the emotion, the will, and when you get done, you've got this fractured person. So, I mean, I teach sometimes in church, people are like, well, you know, I like cherry ice cream, but I'm not sure if I'm feeling cherry ice cream. Mm-hmm. But my body, you can't split up that way. You are one biocycle whole, one spiritual whole that operates, and the Bible might use parts, like you show, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, to talk about the whole, not to talk about the parts, but only the parts as they relate to the whole. Right. So we have a problem in even approaching and discussing those things, not to mention that we have this scientific bias of America dealing with and trying to bring it into a church where science and the church or religion have been put at odds in America. So that's problematic.
Right.